as a software company founder, very few women are owners of technology companies. In fact, of all tech companies, only 5% are women owned. And for whatever reason, women have a harder time raising money from outside investors and raising that very much needed venture capital. So many of the things that we're working on as a council address this issue of how do we help women get needed capital.
The following is brought to you by Thryv, the end-to-end client experience platform that helps you get the job, manage the job, and get credit.
Welcome to Winning on Main Street. I'm Gordon Henry. Thanks for joining us. The American economy is driven by small business, local business people who want to work for themselves and build something successful. And today we're fortunate to be speaking with Sara, the chairman of the board of the National Women's Business Council and the founder of Best Marketing in Washington, D.C., where she has advised over 100 small businesses in the high-tech space and had an incredible career starting out in the high-tech space herself and moving into the consulting world. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Delighted to be here today.
Well, it's great to have you and excited to hear your story. So why don't we just start out at the beginning of your career? How did you get into the high-tech world to begin with?
Well, that was probably one of the only concerted decisions about my career that I made. I was working in a non-tech industry in DC and read a book that came out in the early 80s called Megatrends. And this book outlined 10 different trends that were going to impact all of us in terms of the way we work, the way we live our lives, and the way we just do basic things. And one of those big trends had to do with technology. So I was very impressed with that. And I was just really deciding based on that, I wanted to somehow get involved in the technology industry. Not as a tech person, because I had no tech background. I didn't know anything about tech itself, but I was interested in the way it was going to change our life. And so I was able to get my first job in a tech industry company, and it just went on from there. And I've been involved in that industry for a very long time.
Very farsighted of you to put all that together at a pretty young age, and it served you well, I'm sure. So one of your first jobs was as, I believe, a consultant for America Online, which, for most of us was the first internet company. In fact, some people used to think it was the internet in the early 90s. That must have been an amazing time to be at a place like that when everything was just starting to happen. Can you tell us what was it like? What was it like?
Well, what was interesting about that company and some of the earlier ones that I also worked with was that we didn't consider ourselves a startup. I mean, it's a word that, today we talk about very freely, but back then we were all working for a new company. We weren't working for an IBM or an AT&T. We were working for something new, and it was just small and different. And it wasn't until we got to the .com era when it became a very popular and IPOs became sort of the thing to get involved in, that really the consumers across the country got to hear about what was happening in tech. So those early days were long and hard work because we had to convince people, whether we were selling to consumers, like in the America Online case, or to businesses, such as some of the other ventures that I was involved in previously. We had to convince people that the way they were doing certain aspects of their jobs or communicating with their friends and relatives now could be done in a very different way, and why this different way was going to be better for them.
Yeah. So you were at America Online at the beginning. There were some famous people there at the time, or people who later became famous, like Steve Case, and I think others. Did you have a chance to meet Steve?
So I worked very closely with Steve because one of the very first things that we did together was to change the name of the company to America Online. It had a very technology-centric name prior to that. And it never was going to be a name that was going to work for a service that was geared to the general public. So changing the name was task one, and then launching a big PR campaign to try to educate and inform people across the country what this online service was all about and how they could use it and why it would be fun and interesting and engaging. That was the second task. And then the third was helping him and his CFO to take that company public. And, back then, nobody knew what an IPO was for the most part. And figuring out how do you tell a story of something that novel that most people couldn't relate to, because back then, people were just starting to buy PCs to use at home. And people weren't sure what would you do with it once you got it there. So we had to create a story that kind of brought it down to home level, if you will, to make it make sense for people.
Yep. And who could forget receiving those silver discs they used to send you in the mail, one after another after another? They seem to be everywhere. Was that you? Were you responsible for flooding my house with the silver discs?
No, I was not there at that point in time. By that point in time, I had already joined up with two other co-founders of mine, and we launched our first business venture in 1993. And that was a company that basically took the idea of an America Online, but applied it to a business purpose. So we were selling sort of a structure that had email capabilities and downloadable information libraries and message boards and chat rooms, and made that available to corporations and trade associations as another way for them to communicate with their business partners or their customers. So that was the very first step in my life as a software company founder. And we later then pivoted that company, and this was pre-internet, obviously. We later pivoted that one in the latter part of the 90s to be more of a web-based e-commerce platform. So during that decade of the 90s, lots went on both in technology and in the businesses that were trying to incorporate technology and really disrupt the way business practices were traditionally getting accomplished to very new and novel paradigms.
So let's fast forward a bit to your launch of Best Marketing. So Best Marketing is the company you launched, I think, 2001. You've been doing it for a couple of decades now. You've consulted, I think, for about 100, maybe over 100 high-tech companies and startups, early stage companies, and so forth. What are the most common problems or challenges that companies come to you with, and how do you help solve those?
The biggest challenge that most technology companies face is how to describe what their offering does in terms of the benefits or the advantages to their end user target audience. So often tech companies are started by techies, and they're very enamored of the features and the functions, and look at this dashboard and look at that dashboard, without really thinking about why would a customer benefit by all of that. So it's really understanding the value that that technology can bear on a consumer, if it's an app that they would use at home, or an enterprise system that a large global organization would use to be a more productive organization, or to save money, or to do things better and faster. So messaging has been really the number one challenge that I help companies get around.
And if someone wants to hire you, wants to hire Best Marketing to help them address those challenges, how do they approach you? They just look you up in the, online on the phone, in the phone book, so to speak?
So I've been very involved in this startup and entrepreneurial community in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. So besides working with my clients directly, I'm involved with many of the incubators and accelerators that are here. I serve as a mentor, I do lunch and learn workshops, and essentially I try to help startup founders get that idea crystallized and launched into a real, implemented company. I do a lot of talks to groups where entrepreneurs gather, and topics are related to startups and raising capital and launching products. So most of the business that I get these days is through word of mouth, through past clients, and through really many of the partners that are in this ecosystem and know the work that I have done for many of these companies, really based on my role as a software entrepreneur myself. So the perspective that I bring to startups is not just as a marketer, but as a founder of, company where we began with a blank sheet of paper and made something of it. So that takes a different set of skills than just doing more tactical level experience related to marketing, let's say.
Yeah, fascinating. So you now, as we've said at the beginning, I guess before the show started, in addition to your day job of running Best Marketing, you also have a side hustle, a side gig, which happens to be as chairman of the board, chairwoman of the board of the National Women's Business Council. Tell us, what is the National Women's Business Council? What does it do?
I'm so glad you asked, because we're trying to get that away from being a best kept secret and spreading the word. So we're actually a federal agency that was signed into legislation a little over 30 years ago with one very simple and straightforward mission, which is to support women business owners and female founders around the country. Every year we make recommendations to Congress, to the White House, to the Small Business Administration, and other federal agencies about things that they can do that would help more women get more companies off the ground, or help those women that are already operating a business make that more successful. So we're right now in the process of putting our recommendations together that we'll be making later on this year. And we'll be sharing those in a virtual meeting on September 29th.
Fantastic. So you were appointed to this role by President Trump himself. How did he select you? How did he find you? What was the vetting process like?
So I've been, as I mentioned, pretty active in the startup community locally. And before I took on this role, I was the chairman of the board of the Entrepreneurship Center at the University of Maryland. So many of the things that I've been doing for the last decade or so, including doing some angel investing of my own. So those of you that know the show Shark Tank, it's similar to that, but we don't have TV cameras or the drama that they have. So we basically invest our own money in companies with the hope of making them successful, and ultimately we make money. So I think that my role in this community and the work that I've done in a lot of different ways just kind of circulated, and I was approached by people from the White House and asked, would I accept this role? And I was delighted, because it was just really a natural extension to what I've been doing on the local level, and just really taking that nationally. So all of the activities that we've been doing, to me, are vital in helping women business owners become more successful, and help in many ways level the playing field in areas where they really experience challenges over their male counterparts. So much of my own experience, it really came from the agenda that we're pursuing, came from my, background as a founder of a company, and what were the problems that I faced, and how can I alleviate many of those problems for this next generation of entrepreneurs that are female and, really want to actualize an entrepreneurial dream and, create a business.
Yeah, fascinating. So what are the challenges that you feel women founders or women entrepreneurs face that are different than men?
So one in pretty much universally regarding what type of company and what type of industry that company plays for women founders has to do with access to capital. As a software company founder, very few women are owners of technology companies. In fact, of all tech companies, only 5% are women owned. And for whatever reason, women have a harder time raising money from outside investors and raising that very much needed venture capital. And so many companies go out of business in the first year for lack of capital. So many of the things that we're working on as a council address this issue of how do we help women get needed capital, whether it's through government grants, whether it's through commercial loans. And the areas that we're focusing on this year, clearly having come through this pandemic and seeing so many businesses, particularly Main Street businesses, struggle and close, is really been devastating to women-owned businesses. Some of the numbers that we've seen so far really amount to about 25% of those businesses having gone under. But we were very involved with the SBA and Congress as they were putting the PPP loan program together in making sure that women-owned businesses, which tend to be very, very small, got their fair opportunity to both apply for that loan and get that money. So after that first round of money that many people heard were going to big restaurant chains in the millions of dollars range, we made a point to work closely with the SBA, and I met exclusively with the SBA administrator to speak about the issues that our concern were women were being left out. So they earmarked a certain set of funds, about 60 billion, to small lenders with the hope that small women business owners tend to bank with small lenders and would then be able to get a chance to apply and get those funds. So when we look at some of the findings from that PPP program, looking back now, the small loans of less than $50,000 make up about 2/3 of all those PPP loans. So we feel pretty confident that women did get an opportunity to receive that money. And one of the things that we're considering in part of our recommendations related to it is getting some access to the data. So how many of those small businesses were women-owned versus male-owned? And looking at those numbers, I think will shed a lot of light on what we need to do going forward. So getting our hands on the gender data for those companies will be very important.
Fascinating stuff. We're going to take a break for just a minute now to hear a word from our sponsor. And I first, though, I want to give you a shout out, Liz. You're going to be a speaker at Thrive Connect, which is the upcoming Thrive Connect conference for small businesses and entrepreneurs all over the country. You're going to be attending virtually. And I know it's going to be a great experience for those who are attending to be able to hear from you there in a fuller kind of format. So thank you for your participation in that. We're going to be back in just a minute with Liz Sara.
This episode of Winning on Main Street is brought to you by Thryv, the end-to-end client experience platform that includes everything small business owners need to meet their customers' expectations. Thryv's award-winning and fully mobile interface delivers technology previously reserved for big business to the fingertips of small business owners nationwide. Thryv's built specifically for small business, but there's nothing small about what it can do. Thryv handles your entire customer experience, helping business owners reach more customers, stay organized, get paid faster, and generate online reviews, all from a single device or screen. To learn more about Thryv, visit winningonmainstreet.com and click on Get a Demo. When it comes to software to run your business, there's no comparison. Check out Thryv today.
Okay, we're back with Liz Sara, the chairman of the board of the National Women's Business Council and also the founder and leader of Best Marketing, a company in Washington that advises high-tech startups and small businesses in the high-tech space. So we're going to turn, after hearing about the experiences you've had with the PPP loans and advising the government on how to get more money to women founders, talk a little bit about the state of entrepreneurship. So we've been in this pandemic now since March, roughly about 5 months. How do you feel the small businesses across America are faring?
Well, unfortunately, many women-owned small businesses tend to be Main Street companies. Mm-hmm. Boutiques, bakeries, bookkeeping, consulting firms, hair salons. And as we all know, looking in our own neighborhoods,
Yeah.
They're not doing very well.
Mm.
Our hope is that many of them will be able to come back and reopen and get business back to a point where they can make money doing that. But we know it's been a particularly difficult time for these women-owned businesses because of the nature of the companies that they are starting and operating.
Right.
One of the issues that we're working on as the National Women's Business Council is obviously supporting them, but also looking at what are the ways that we can encourage and motivate other young women that might have an entrepreneurial leaning to think about starting a company in a STEM-related area. A science, a chemical company, a manufacturing company, a tech company, an architecture company. And what will it take to get women to feel that they would have the confidence and they would have the ability to do that while they themselves might not be a chemistry major or a computer science major or an architecture major? And so I think as we look at what are the organizations that are in place around the country that can really weigh and have a vocal impact on encouraging women to look at some of these larger businesses that are in non-traditional areas for women, it will give more women an opportunity to play at a national level and potentially an international level rather than just a local and neighborhood level.
Yeah.
And that's important in general. When we look at the number of women-owned businesses in the country, it's about 12.3 million. And it represents 42% of all businesses. And that is just fantastic because when we compare that to when women-owned businesses were first counted, and that was in 1977, they only made up 4.6% of all businesses. So we've come a long way, but we have further to go. And personally, I would like to see more women-owned companies that are in very non-traditional areas for women.
Yeah, really interesting you say that because we've seen that many of these Main Street retailers owned by whoever, male, female, etc., have suffered. We've all seen the restaurants, as you said, in our own neighborhoods. And yet many of the service businesses are doing okay. In fact, some are doing well. I've heard companies that install pools are doing well. Companies that fix roofs or maybe even remodel your kitchen. These service businesses, because many people are sitting at home and they can't go anywhere and they're kind of looking around the house saying, I'd like to fix that. I'd like to upgrade that. And since I'm not spending the money on going out to restaurants, maybe I can spend the money on fixing up my house. And so many of those businesses are kind of doing okay, but yet the retailers, as you said, the Main Street retailer, not doing so well.
And there are certain kinds of service businesses that women are known for that can have a digital component to it. So a personal trainer may not be able to meet one-on-one with her clients, but there are things that she can do online and that would work. And she's got to be clever and creative and willing to take that digital step. So some things will translate and others, unfortunately, will not.
Yeah. What are your expectations, Liz, for the near future in terms of the pandemic? I don't know if this is something in your role as the chairperson of the National Women's Business Council, if you look at, but do you see a second wave? Do you see this rest of this year seeing another dip, or we see a very bullish stock market right now? What is Main Street going to see in the next 6 months or so?
Well, I wish I had that crystal ball because then I'd be investing my money in all the right places, right? So it's really hard to know, but we're constantly in touch with Congress to see what their plans might be for future emergency funding. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I had a meeting with the House Small Business Committee to talk about, if there was going to be another round of money available to businesses, what would we want to ensure could be put in place as part of that for women-owned businesses. And many women-owned businesses are sole proprietors. So maybe something as simple as using the language sole proprietor more often than it has been used, so that women that have those kinds of businesses feel like they're included, and that loan money or a grant or whatever the financing arrangement might be that gets enacted would be also available to them. So sometimes it's something that simple. And I think also making sure that women have the information that they need from a financial standpoint. And we've seen through a series of roundtables that we did across the country last year that many women-owned businesses don't have the same financial literacy as their male counterparts. Why that is, we don't know, but we want to fix it. And we want to make sure that there are resources out there that are better communicating to those people, women in particular, that can take advantage of it and benefit by having a more sound financial understanding of their own company and the financial documents that are necessary to apply for loans or apply for grants.
Right, fantastic. Liz, what is the key advice you give to entrepreneurs who are just starting out right now, especially in the times we're in today? Is there anything in particular that you focus on and saying, okay, if you're looking to start a company, here's what you should do?
So there's a few things that I suggest. And one is you can't be an expert at all phases of running a business. So look at what your skill sets are and look at what's missing and find partners. It doesn't have to mean going to somebody and making them a co-founder, but it could mean getting an advisor or getting a mentor or getting someone that would come and work with you, maybe not for a salary at the early stages, but that could turn into a salaried position later on. So when I look at myself, when we started our first software company, my background is all business and marketing. I didn't know anything about developing software, but my one co-founder was the software guru, and the other was our finance guy, and he was able to use his savings to bootstrap our company. So between the three of us, we each brought something very different to the table, and without any one of the three, it would have been very difficult to get that company off the ground. And so when I talk with would-be entrepreneurs, I share that same story and say, whatever your skills are, look for others to round out your team, and that will help you be more focused, have what you need on day one, and not waste time doing things that don't make sense because they're not in your wheelhouse. Get the people who can bring that to your table.
That's great. Great advice. You know, we have interviewed here at the show many great small business experts, but two that come to mind: Bridget Weston over at SCORE, who you probably know, and T. Rowe over at the SBDC. And for people who are listening who may have missed those shows, well, first of all, check them out and listen. But secondly, SCORE is a great mentorship organization, and SBDC is a great advice organization where you can go to the SBDC, America's Small Business Development Centers all over the country, wherever you are, and get advice, get learnings, get information, similar to what Liz is about here to help you navigate the path of becoming a successful entrepreneur. So that's great stuff. We just have a few minutes left. I wanted to turn to Liz Sara, the person, and not just Liz Sara, the business person. So you seem awfully busy. You got a day job, you got a side gig. What do you do for fun?
So before the pandemic closed down lots of things, including cultural arts organizations and performing arts organizations, I ran an opera company on the side in DC.
Oh my
I've
God.
been doing that for many years, and it's just been a great love of mine. I can't sing a note, let me just say that right up front. But we would perform opera combined with cocktail receptions and dinners at ambassadorial residences. So it was a very small group format, maybe 100 people, with professional opera singers from around the world and professional musicians, and an actress who would narrate what was going on, so that in the end, and most operas end with somebody dying, you knew who did it and why they did it, and everybody else lived happily ever after. So with the pandemic, the opera performances have been put on hold. But in lieu of that, my significant other have been very aptly watching a series of Netflix and Amazon Prime shows that have become quite addicting.
Yeah. Any favorites on Netflix?
Oh my gosh, many. So we've been through the entire series of Ozark, which was fantastic. The Americans, fantastic. Bosch, Goliath, and now we're working on Person of Interest. So,
So that sounds fun. That sounds fun. Well, there's a reason Netflix stock is at an all-time high because we've all been watching a lot of it. So you're probably not able to really take a vacation now, and of course you sound super busy. But if you were able to take a real vacation now, where would you go?
without a doubt, without even thinking more than 2 seconds, I would go to Italy. I would find a villa and I would just camp out there as long as I could. As long as the money lasted, on Italian wine and Italian food. I'd love it.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, hopefully we'll all be able to do those fun things one of these days. I know a lot of people are itching to get out. So just to kind of wind things up, we don't often on this show get to speak to people who are as integrated in the Washington decision-making set as you, but it seems you know a lot of people in Washington. You're up on the Hill and so forth. Any secrets you can tell us that people might be interested in knowing?
Well, now if I told a secret, it wouldn't be a secret anymore, right?
Okay, good answer.
Keep my mouth closed.
Right. Well, it is ever-changing, that Washington scene, and many of us find it interesting. But I want to thank you. You've been an incredible guest, and you've had such an exciting career, and I'm really thrilled you're going to be speaking at Thrive Connect. I know people are going to be really interested in hearing what you have to say, particularly women founders and women would-be entrepreneurs, but also I'm sure many of the things you say apply equally to both sexes. So we're really looking forward to that as well. So thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me.
So we've been talking to Liz Sara, who is the chairman of the board of the National Women's Business Council, as well as the founder and head of Best Marketing, a company that advises high-tech entrepreneurs on how to get to the next level. She's based in Washington. Thank you, Liz, again for your time. And tune in next episode for insights with other great entrepreneurs. And thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this program, please subscribe to our podcast and recommend it to a friend or fellow entrepreneur. And again, coming up on November 10th and 11th is Thrive Connect 20, an event that's designed to help entrepreneurs and would-be entrepreneurs get to the next level in running their business. So please check out Thrive Connect 20 and sign up, register today. This has been Gordon Henry, Winning on Main Street. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.